We're joined by Sunil Gavaskar live on the show. Sunil bhai, the Australian team has a reputation at the moment, and this is something that we spoke about yesterday as well, that no matter what one team puts on the board, they will end up chasing it just to signify the strength that they have in their batting lineup. Do you think what we saw today, they're living up to that reputation?
Well, they certainly are. I think 309 was never an easy score to chase. You're asked to score at more than 6 runs and over. And they'd lost their openers also pretty early. So India really need to find a way to get rid of the Australian skipper, Steve Smith. They haven't found a way to dismiss him last year. Now the first match of the new series suggests that they're still struggling to find a way to get the Australian skipper out cheaply. And unless they do that, I think the Australians are going to score more runs.
Right, Saibhai, MS Dhoni was asked, was 309 enough? And he thought it was. He thought the bowlers were not up to the mark. Would you agree with that assessment? Or do you think the Indian batting could have notched up a few more runs?
Well, no, I think 309 was a good total. I mean, clearly when you lose, you always say to yourself, maybe another 20 runs, because the match finished in the 50th over, 49.2 overs when the Australians notched the winning run. So you can turn around and say, yes, maybe another 15 runs would have been useful. But that's always, you know, in hindsight. I do believe that the straight boundaries at Perth are very, very short. So a little bit disadvantageous for the Indian spinners in particular. But you've got to give credit to the Australians. They batted really well. And you've got to also give credit to the Indians. Rohit and Virat were absolutely smashing, brilliant. But sometimes, you know, that happens. And once again, let me come back to the pitch which we talked about yesterday, about Perth being fast and bouncy and all that. And we've seen that, you know, it's a bit overrated in recent times, the pitch. So clearly the pitches in Australia are now very, very good for batting.
Okay, the reason I'm asking you that question, Sunil bhai, about the Indian batting not being up to the mark today vis-a-vis the bowling, because if you were to compare the bowling lineups of both teams, at the moment it does seem that the Australian bowling lineup is much weaker, more inexperienced. So in that sense, the Indian batting were up against a very inexperienced bowling lineup, whereas the Australian batting lineup had a tougher task of facing the Indian bowling lineup, which is not the best in the world, but looks slightly better than the current Aussie bowling lineup. In that sense, would you think it was a batting shootout between the Australian batsman and the Indian batsman, and that is how it's going to be throughout this series, so the Indian batsmen better pull up their socks?
Clearly, it's going to be a battle of the batsmen, because, you know, as I said, the pitches in Australia are very, very good for batting. So unless once you negotiate the new ball in Australia and in South Africa, the pitches turn out to be terrific to bat. So my honest advice to the Indian batsman would be to try and, you know, capitalize on these pitches, score as many as you can, try and keep going. And clearly, I think you've got to look at maybe 350 as the minimum that you need to score. Maybe it might be interesting if India are chasing, because at the moment, you know, the kind of bowling that the Indians have on these kind of pitches, even a 350 score might be gettable by the Australians. So it might actually be interesting if India are chasing, how the Australia's inexperienced bowlers are able to contain the Indian batsmen. I think that's something that we'll need to see.
Okay. Saibhai, let's take a look at the approach of the Indian team, especially with regards to their batting. Now, this is a trend that we've seen with the Indian team, and it served them really well from the time of the Champions Trophy in 2013, that they try and keep the wickets intact and then accelerate towards the later part of the inning. You know, be a bit more conservative to start with. It worked really well with the earlier ODI rules, where you had, you know, too many restrictions. You had bowlers, the catchers there in the beginning, then you had the batting power play, then you had less fielders outside the top in the last 10 overs. Now all that has changed. Now, you know, it's becoming a little more bowler friendly. Do you think that approach that the Indian team had, which served them well, like I said, of being conservative to begin with and then accelerate, needs to slightly change a bit, maybe go back to the earlier ODI style we used to see, bang, bang from the beginning?
Well, I think if you lose wickets early, then I think it puts pressure on the batsman down the order. I think the kind of form that Rohit Sharma has displayed, as well as Virat Kohli, I think India need to keep up the same kind of momentum. Clearly, I think they need to maybe accelerate just a little bit more towards the end once they've got going. But I don't think you can fault the batsmen for the way they've batted. They've batted really well, and you know, these kind of things happen. If there was a little bit in the surface which the spinners could have exploited, then 309 would have been a winning score. But you know, the one thing that I would also like to comment on is this white ball. The white ball does nothing does nothing for the bowlers. And I actually, call it a nothing doing ball because it does nothing. What could be interesting is with the success of the pink ball in Test match cricket, it might be an idea because that we saw at the Adelaide game that the ball was swinging, seaming. Nathan Lyon was getting the ball to grip and turn. So maybe in limited overs cricket, to even the balance between bat and ball, might be an idea to try a pink ball for limited overs cricket. That would be interesting. I know it has got to be experimented at the domestic level. And if that is the case, maybe the IPL can have a few matches, not all matches, a few matches where they can experiment with the pink ball in the initial stages and see how it goes. Because I do really believe that the balance between bat and ball needs to be even, and the white ball is not helping that at all.
Okay, interesting thoughts those. Play with a pink ball in one-day cricket. Saibai, looking at a few positives for India apart from Rohit Sharma's knock. The other one was Barinder Saran's debut. What did you make of him? He's not the quickest bowler that we've seen, and now India does produce some real, genuinely quick bowlers. He's not that quick, we saw, but quite effective.
Yes, I think the important thing is it doesn't matter how quick you are. You must be able to get wickets, and he's getting wickets. I think if he can develop the ball that comes into the right-hander, Wasim Akram's there, so speak to Wasim, try and pick his brains how to get that ball in, because that is one ball that I believe can cause a bit of a problem for the Australian captain Steve Smith. He shuffles so much towards his off stump that the ball coming in, swinging in late, coming in can trap him leg before or bowl him behind his legs. So that's something that needs to be developed. And a left-hand bowler bowling over the wicket can do that. Maybe talk to Ashish Nehra. Ashish Nehra has a terrific incoming delivery like that. Wasim, these are the guys that young Sran should be talking to so that he can develop that ball and get rid of the Australian skipper very early, because that is so important. He actually loves the Indian bowling. He doesn't seem to get out to the Indian bowlers, and his dismissal is going to be very crucial in containing Australia.
All right, Saimai, stay with us. As we showed our viewers in the highlights earlier, George Bailey, who made 112 today, could have easily been dismissed for a duck had DRS been in use. So does the Indian captain regret not being in favour of the DRS all these years? Let's listen in.
We need to push the umpires to take the right decision. And you have to see, how many 50-50 decision doesn't go in our favour. And it always happens, that you have to take it. But I'm still not convinced about DRS.
Right. Final word from you, Saimai, on the entire DRS thing. The good thing is, at least in hindsight, MS Dhoni isn't changing his mind. He's saying it still needs to be worked on. Yes, the decision didn't go our way today, but we stick to our stand.
Yes, I think the Indian players are pretty certain about the fact that as far as the predictive element is concerned, that it's not 100%, and so therefore they are not very keen on having the DRS. They have indeed, I believe, proposed that the rest of the DRS they are quite happy to accept, which is for catches like this, like we saw with George Bailey, or the runouts and stumpings. But apparently the ICC is insisting that it's got to be the whole way, or not just part of the DRS. So I think we'll just have to wait a little bit more before we hear whether India is going to accept it or not.